Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings and surrounding St. Johns County, Florida, over a century ago. These are stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So sit back and enjoy as I share with you a few of the stories from this week in 1919. But 8 votes were cast in city election. The annual town election held Tuesday proved to be the greatest fizzle in the history of Hastings. With 7 vacancies in the town offices to be filled, the names of only 3 candidates appeared on the ballot, and only 8 votes were cast out of a complete registration of approximately 75. The officials elected were R.M. Burt, mayor, C.M. DuPont, and C.B. Bailey, councilman. These officials, with Frank Bartlett, who was the only holdover from the former town council, comprise the town officials for the coming year. At the coming election, which will be called when a sufficient number of candidates can be obtained, 4 members of the town council will be up for election. At present, there is no indication as to who the candidates will be, as no citizens have yet been found who are willing to run for office. Mayor Burt lost valuable possessions when old family home burned. Mayor R.M. Burt of Hastings lost many valuable books and papers when the old Burt mansion in Palatka Heights burned last Sunday. The house was the first built in Palatka Heights, having been erected by Judge James Burt in 1884. Many pieces of valuable antique furniture, some of them brought from England many years ago, valuable paintings, Revolutionary, Civil War, and World War relics, and ancestral portraits were destroyed. Among the relics burned were General Washington's powder puff and bag, a book from which Abraham Lincoln studied, which bore his autograph, a tea box brought from Japan by Commodore Perry, and bayonets from the John Brown raid at Harper's Ferry. Expenditure of $7,500,000 provided in contract. Calling for a minimum expenditure of $7.5 million, the contract for the Fountain of Youth Hotel Company improvements has been signed, and preliminary plans are now in course of preparation. From time to time, mention of the proposed development has been given, but there was nothing definite. Now there is more information from Fred Hall, who has been promoting this proposition. It will include improvement to the waterfront. Boulevards will stretch along the water and canals will intersect each other, making of the place a miniature Venice. The beach will be developed, a hotel and cottages being planned at a point almost opposite the Fountain of Youth. The hotel is to be a mammoth structure and will have pretentious entrances on each side. An auditorium of enormous proportions is to be built, and in front of it, one of the world's largest pipe organs. An observatory is also planned, with one of the largest telescopes in the United States. For the pleasure-loving younger element, there will be an ice skating rink. A roof garden on the hotel will round out a very comprehensive plan for an ideal winter resort. Building alterations. The portion of the wooden building adjoining the Hastings Cold Storage Company and owned by that company is undergoing extensive repairs and alterations. The rooms formerly hosted the local telephone exchange. It's understood that the work is being done at the request of a probable renter from out of town. Bimini Oil Company busily engaged drilling for oil. The Bimini Oil Company, with headquarters at St. Augustine, is busily engaged drilling for oil on the Carter and Hitchcock Farm, located about 12 miles west of St. Augustine on the Tocoi Road. The drill had penetrated to a depth of approximately 250 feet. After breaking through a 12-foot strata of flint, a sort of shale was encountered, and the pressure of gas has forced a heavy flow of water to the surface. The well now is showing indications of the presence of oil, bringing to the surface a sort of oil-bearing asbestos as a base. The samples that have been brought to town are oozy with oil, and those who have visited the well have been astonished at the quantities on the surface of the pool adjacent to the drilling operations. Illicit still captured by sheriff's force. In a raid on an illicit still at Oak Landing operated by a Negro, Sheriff Boyce and a force of deputies had an exciting experience last night in which the man was shot in the foot. The sheriff learned of the copious supply of liquor in that section, and on visiting Oak Landing, he was convinced that the booze was manufactured close at hand. He suspected a Negro man who resided close to the mill. The officers went to the house and found a woman there. She said her husband was at what in turpentine camps is known as the juke, or a place of amusement. The officers waited from 11 until 1 o'clock before the man appeared. The sheriff's deputy, and officers surrounded the house, and when the man came into the clearing, the deputy rushed forward armed with a double-barrel shotgun. He ordered the man to throw up his hands and was answered by a shot from a pistol the man was carrying. The man turned to run, and the deputy fired 3 shots, one taking effect into the suspect's foot. The man succeeded in gaining the house and slammed the door. When officers searched, they found him hiding in a bed. His foot was bleeding profusely, and he was anxious to have it attended to. A search of the premises revealed 2 10-gallon kegs filled with mash that had already soured, also nearly 5 quarts of freshly made moonshine. A primitive still was taken by the officers, and the man, his wife, and another man placed under arrest and brought to the county jail. From the editorial section. This week we have an editorial from the Hastings Herald in December 1919. This one shows that, although 100 years have passed, some things never change. The topic? Affordable housing. It is titled, The Housing Situation. In at least some respect, Hastings is as metropolitan as any of the big centers to the northward, and that is in the scarcity of available living accommodations. A careful canvass of the city during the week just past has revealed the fact that, although there are a few houses for sale, there appears to be not one for rent. According to prominent businessmen of the city, the reason for this lies in the fact that people are not building to accommodate increasing demands because of a tendency on the part of possible builders to await a possible reduction in the cost of building materials. The hope of such a reduction seems to be largely without foundation. The prominent engineering and building companies of the country are proceeding on the assumption that building costs will not be lower for years, and that probably they will never be lower. With the increasing demands in this city, and with the evident tendency of building costs to stand as they are or go up, it is very likely it would be a paying venture for Hastings citizens to erect a few houses or bungalows for rent. At present, there are several men employed in this city who are obliged to keep their families elsewhere because of the inability to obtain living accommodations here. Such a condition certainly does not tend to hold men in Hastings, to say nothing of inducing others to come here. Did you enjoy this week's Talk of the Times? Make sure to follow the Hastings Main Street page to hear new episodes when they come out. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Murillo, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. Now it's time for this week's musical memory, when we listen back to a song that everyone was listening to over 100 years ago. This week's musical memory is from 1919. This week, there was a special performance being booked in Palatka of a very famous band. They were called Vicella's Italian Band and had recorded a number of albums. They had just performed for a few weeks at the fair in Jacksonville and were booked to play locally in Palatka at the Arcade Theater. So how about this week we listen back to a song the people of Palatka may have been listening to live in the Arcade Theater this week in 1919. Here's Vicella's Italian Band with The Last Hope.